Good evening. I'm Barron Cruz. Hi, I'm Barron Cruz. Hi, I'm Barron Cruz. Hi, I'm Barron Cruz. Oh, hi, I'm Barron Cruz. Hi there, I'm Barron Cruz. Hey, what's up, dude? I'm Barron Cruz. Hey, I'm Barron Cruz. Hi, I'm Barron Cruz. Hey there, I'm Barron Cruz. I'm Barron Cruz, and I can guarantee that you are underestimating the impact that a first impression has on the entirety of a relationship that you may or may not have. Today, I'm going to give you some examples and some studies to help illustrate the true power that it has, and then more importantly, go into some concepts and tips that you can use immediately to increase the first impression that you're giving off when meeting new people. Welcome to the Charisma Matrix. So you think you got a pretty good feel about how important first impressions are? Well, I'm going to go through some statistics and some data and studies to really drive home the fact about just how lasting first impressions are. It takes 1/10 of a second to make a snap first impression about someone. And if you were to allow people another 5 seconds to change or alter that first impression, 90% of the time it doesn't change. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that our bodies and our brains are amazing at making snap decisions about people. We're amazing at assigning accurate attributes about people simply by the way they look. Secondly, we were shown, not us, but a group was shown pictures of people. And then they were given a fact about them. And it was either a good or bad fact, like an experience in their history. Like this person volunteered his time at the 4-H club with the young boys. Or another one is this guy spent a little time in jail. And then afterwards, about 10 minutes later, they gave them another fact, which was the reciprocal of the first. So the first was good, the second was bad, or the first was bad, the second was good. And they used the exact same stories about these people interchangeably. And what they found was that when the good story was told first, well, the goodness resonated far beyond the bad story. So they said this person volunteered, 10 minutes later this person did some time in jail. Their overall perception on this person was going to remain very, very positive. Now, if it was the inverse and the negative fact was told before the good, even when it was the exact same facts, well, the negativity stayed in that person's mind and they continued to think of that person in a negative light. So this goes to show just how important the very first impressions are, even if it's followed with a bunch of great interactions and great knowledge and great additional information is brought about you. If it started negatively, it's very, very hard to get away from that. A study that shows just how amazingly accurate we are at assigning attributes to people without even meeting them is people were shown a photo of someone and they spent as much time as they wanted, typically between 5 and 10 minutes with them. And they wrote down attributes that they thought this person would have. So income, personality type, character traits, what they might do for a job. And then a month later, they met these people and it was amazingly accurate how they predicted this person would be, not only in what they did as a work, what they did as a profession, how much money they made, but what they would be like to interact with socially. Were they warm? Were they nice? Were they reserved? Were they outgoing? We're able to accurately predict that. And some people think, evolutionary biologists think that we spent so many of our resources developing the part of our brain that accurately is able to do that because it was so important back in the day when we used to run in tribes of 50 and 75 and we'd constantly be meeting new tribes and new people and have to decide instantaneously if they were cool or not, if we trusted them or not. Our brains became very overdeveloped in this aspect, and this study would go to kind of confirm that kind of thought. Lastly, this is just kind of an interesting tip. When you meet someone for the first time in person, you're much more likely to come across in a favorable way as opposed to on the phone or in a video chat. And they haven't really been able to discern why that is, but they do know same people meeting people oftentimes, majority of the time, comes across much better when you can meet them in person. And it's interesting because you would think that if someone was very good vocally, but maybe didn't have a good posture or body language, it'd be better to meet on the phone. But this study showed otherwise. So if you ever have a chance to meet someone and it's going to be an important introduction in person, go that route. So I read a very interesting description and definition of what a first impression is. And what it basically says is a first impression is a person's prediction on what a relationship would be like with you in the future. So think about that for a second. Really what they're trying to say is, what would it be like if I was to continue a relationship, continue to get to know with this person? What would it be like? Do I want to invest? Do I want to stay away? Is it worth my time? How much of my time is it worth? I thought that was kind of a clairvoyant description. They say that first impressions are based on 5 characteristics: likability, attractiveness, trustworthiness, aggressiveness, which is kind of interesting, and competence. So there was a gal who had been in recruiting for 30 plus years, and they wanted to get some best practices from her as far as what she felt, and actually running these studies, what she actually responded to when she was narrowing down good or bad candidates. And some of the best practices are, number 1, solid eye contact. What this shows is, first of all, you're a confident person. Confident people make longer lasting eye contact. That's a known fact. It's hard. It's very hard to do, especially in a stressful situation if you're not confident. Now, I personally believe that when you're first meeting someone, if you're talking, you should hold eye contact 85% of the time. And if you're listening, I think that should be up to 95% of the time. And I know to a lot of people who don't study this stuff or maybe haven't put a lot of emphasis on social interaction, that sounds very surprising, but I find it very accurate. And people who are described as very charismatic or great salespeople who are at ease in social situations have amazingly strong eye contact, and they hold it for a long time. And you got to be sure you don't do this in a creepy way. A lot of people feel like holding eye contact for a long time in general is creepy. This isn't the case. It shows interest, it shows confidence, and it gives off a lot of other positive attributes. You just want to be sure that you're also giving some nonverbal cues. You're moving around. You're just not a rock like this. So eye contact, number 1. Number 2, they're good conversationalists. They talk a lot. So it wasn't like they'd ask them a question, they'd give one-word responses. They were ready to fill in the blanks and ready to go a little beyond what the question was asked. So, hey, I heard you grew up in Chicago. Yep, grew up right outside of Chicago. No. They were more like, yeah, I grew up outside of Chicago. I actually took the train in to go to high school, actually in the city for a while, and ended up going out to DePaul and lived in Lincoln Park. It was fantastic. So they're able to elaborate, and that puts people at ease. It shows confidence because you're able to speak freely on topics and questions. Lastly, they were comfortable and they were at ease in the environment. And this is indicative through all of your body language, your tonality, and everything else. But this can be very hard to accomplish. So in order to do this, I want to introduce a concept that I have, which is called the comfort loop. And this applies, and this can be applied when you're meeting someone new for the first time. So what happens when you meet someone new for the first time? Well, typically you're both kind of nervous. You're both stressed. Is the other person going to have anything to say? Are they going to be rude? What's this going to be like? So what you need to do is, hopefully at some point you can develop to the point that you're confident that when you meet someone new, you can be comfortable and you won't have to use the comfort loop because you'll just be comfortable. But when you are uncomfortable, now both parties are uncomfortable, what you want to do is consciously manage and reduce the signs you're giving off that you're stressed. So what you're going to do is, first of all, check your tonality. Are you using a soft or using a supplicative, uptonative tonality? Or using a nice, bold, strong, confident tonality? You're going to be sure your body is very nice and loose, especially your shoulders. And you're also going to be sure you have that strong, solid, confident eye contact. You're going to slow down a little bit because when we're stressed, we naturally have the tendency to speed up and to talk really fast, and it gives off all those stress signals. Now, these reduced stress signals are going to resonate with the other person through these mirror neurons. So as you lowering the stress signals you're giving off, you're going to lower the stress within them. It's almost like a little bit of a magic trick, but they're going to feel more at ease. And when they feel at ease, they're going to give off lower stress signals, which organically is going to lower your stress. This is why I call it the comfort loop. So, like I said, once you get to the point where you're very comfortable, well, you're just going to come in comfortable. They're going to come in stressed, but the mirror neurons in them are naturally going to lower their stress level because you truly are comfortable. But until you can get to that point, you're going to consciously reduce the signals you're giving off, and this is going to resonate with them and therefore come back to you and be kind of a loop, hence the name. All right, so now let's get into some actionable tips that you can immediately apply to improve the first impression that you're giving off. Thinking back to that 1/10 of a second, we need to understand that oftentimes the first impression that we make is going to be completely nonverbal. Because in 1/10 of a second, you're probably not talking to them. And even if you're talking to somebody else, mostly besides your tonality, they're going to pick up on your physicality and your nonverbals. So what are the most important components? Well, your dress is going to be very, very important. I've talked in other videos about just how important your dress is, how people assign amazingly different attributes just based on people's dress. So your dress, your posture, your physical fitness. People make a lot of projections and decisions based on someone's physical fitness. Your facial expressions are going to be huge because, as we know, those are very telling. Your comfort level. Are you comfortable? Are your shoulders down? Are you loose? Is your body moving normal? Are you stiff like you're in rigor mortis? And lastly, your eye contact. Now, I'm a huge believer that when you're meeting people, especially socially competent people, eye contact is the biggest teller. Especially if you're actually meeting them face to face. If someone's across the room and you're making that first impression just based on that, you can pick up on their eye contact with other people, but mostly with you. When you have super strong, confident eye contact with people, it tells you so much about them. Rarely will you meet someone that when you're meeting them has awesome eye contact, and then they end up being, kind of a dud, not a confident person, not much going. It's very, very telling and indicative of that person's level of confidence. So the first time they see you is the first time that the impression is starting. So most people think when you meet, when you shake hands is when you're forming a first impression. No, the first time they see you across the room, in your car, driving up, wherever it may be, that's where the first impression is forming. So understand that. When you're going to be meeting new people, immediately upon coming in the room, immediately upon leaving your hotel room, you may see people in the hallway, you may see people in the elevator. That's when the first impression starts informing them. That's when it starts to form. Number 2, only express positive emotions. That's all you want to do. Never any negative, never any anger, never even any disagreement. Studies show you only have to get through 4 minutes and then 95% of the perception is formed. So even if they say something that's grossly against what you believe in, well, at least for 4 minutes, just chill out. You don't have to agree, but don't disagree. Because then if you do confront them with a disagreement after 4 minutes and that initial impression is strong, it's going to be a much more palatable objection that you bring up as opposed to when they're forming it. When you disagree with them, they're going to think of you poorly for the remainder of the relationship. So why not just suck it up and be cool for a few minutes and then bring it up later with a little tact? They're much more likely to receive it the way that you want them to. You want your body to be loose. That's very telling. You want your shoulders to be very loose. Stress is shown in our shoulders a lot of times. You'll find them creeping up in intense situations. Just often check them. Let them hang down real nice and low. You always want to have a canned line. Whether you use it or not is not important because when you're out meeting people, and I'm referring to more networking events or business events as opposed to on the street, but on the street is fine. But always have something that you can say regardless. And, for me, it's probably just, hey, how you doing? How's your day? Or, hey, when did you get in? Just so you can be confident in these situations. Not, oh, I hope he doesn't come up to me. What am I going to say? Because for sure you've got something to say. So come up with something relevant to the topic. You're there for some sort of a medical device event. And, the things you're going to say is, oh, hey, man, I'm Barron. What space of medical device are you in? Okay, so you got that, you're confident. From there, whatever they say, you can jump on those threads. But have that confidence that no matter what, you've got something to say. It's going to really show in your overall confidence in the setting. Like the study I referenced earlier, if it's an important meeting, an important person, by all means, go out of your way to meet them in person because you're much more likely to make a favorable first impression when you do so. Now, remember the comfort loop. Until you get to that point, and most people are not at that point, it takes a lot of confidence to when you go up to someone new, you don't have any stress. It's natural in humans. You almost have to be, someone like me who's been doing this for 15 years to be able to do that. And you definitely could get there if you worked at it as long as I have. It's not something that I'm special at doing, but I've just become comfortable with it because I've done it so much. So until you've done that, implement that comfort loop. Notice what's stressing me? What am I showing? What signs of stress am I showing? And then consciously reduce those and watch the loop begin to take form. Lastly, the probably most important thing in making a good first impression is eye contact. Strong, almost as if you're interrogating them a little bit. And if you can see they're getting a little creeped out by the intensity, you can back it off with the verbals, what you're saying. But very strong, overshoot on the strength of your eye contact because it gives off so many subtle attributes and people project so many characteristics on you just by that. It's a no-brainer. And it's going to be tough because you hear my thoughts on 85% when you are talking and 95% when you're listening. It sounds very high. But as you begin to implement these and you see the positive reactions that you get, you're naturally going to want to, and you're naturally going to subconsciously increase the amount of time that you're making this direct eye contact. I'm Barron Cruz. Thank you for watching. I'm Barron Cruz. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to subscribe below. It'll give you a first look at my videos that come out that can help increase your charisma and social confidence.